Welcome, everyone, to Episode 6 of the Batman vs. James Bond show. I am your host, Brian Thomas. Thanks for joining me. This is the show where we discuss everything related to Batman and James Bond movies, news, trailers, scores, reviews, matchups, and more. First off, I would like to thank everyone who's tuned in since Episode 1. And for all you new listeners out there, welcome. Grab a martini, or if you're like Bruce Wayne and don't drink, grab a ginger ale, sit back and relax because we have a very, very special episode. Before we get started, just a few things I would like to mention. Number one, please subscribe to the Batman vs. James Bond show on iTunes and leave a nice little review for me on there. I would very much appreciate it. Number two, I've been teasing this for a little while now. James Bond fans, I know we've done a lot of Batman talk on here, nothing but Batman v Superman. It's almost turned into just the Batman show and James Bond, in there. But finally, the surprise, the wait is over. This week, I finally had a chance to talk with Mark O'Connell, the author of Catching Bullets, Memoirs of a Bond Fan. Mark and I had a really great conversation and chat. We talked about both franchises, Batman and James Bond, their future, shared universes, 007 worlds, all kinds of things, what it means to be a fan. So without further ado, let's just hop right into this because this is a really great treat for you guys. And Batman fans, don't worry, like I said, there's a lot of Batman talk in there too. So here we go. All right, without further ado, I'd like to welcome a very special guest to the Batman vs. James Bond show, author of Catching Bullets, Memoirs of a Bond Fan, Mr. Mark O'Connell. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing great, sir. It's a pleasure to have you and for you to join me here. And
Not at all. No, thank you for asking. That's a great concept. I love the idea of Batman v James Bond. Good timing as well.
Thank you. Oh, yes. The timing was like maybe 3 weeks from the actual film. And I when I thought about the idea, I'm like, I want to do this, but I don't want everybody to think I'm just doing this just because the Batman movie's coming out. It's just that I'm a fan of both things and so forth.
Why not? Yes, a good way of combining the two.
Right. So let me start off by saying this. I always consider myself a pretty big fan of James Bond, but after reading your book, I think it's safe to say you had me beat.
Oh, you know what? I'm still like a bronze card holding Bond fan. There are people that just amaze and stagger me, so I'm still quite low down on the sort of Darwinian ascent of Bond fan. I'm still low, but yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm jumping ahead here, but even in your book, you said the greatest test of a Bond fan is surely not how much they know of their subject, the T-shirts, watches, remastered soundtracks, etc., but whether they still get the enjoyment from catching bullets. And that's exactly how your book kind of went into it. So I'll let you explain a little bit about that. Your thoughts on that.
Yes, it's Catching Bullets. It's a book about being a fan. It just happens to be being a fan of Bond films. But I also have this thread running through it, which is a true thing, that my grandfather Jimmy worked for Cubby Broccoli and the Broccoli Bond family for well over 30 years, and that was always in the background of my childhood and growing up. Bond was always spoken about way before I even saw my first Bond film, so a few people urged me, why don't you use that? Why don't you put that into a book? If you're going to do a book about being a Bond fan, you have to use it. And I shied away because I just thought it's too obvious, and also I just thought it was a bit tenuous and tacky, but it actually became a great sort of way into discussing and looking at the films again and that fandom. And it's a book about sort of pre-internet, pre-teasers, pre-trailers, teasers. We live in this strange, often brilliant movie-going time of we have teasers for teasers for teasers now.
Yeah.
It's sort of ridiculous. I love it. I love the fact that we can watch a trailer, at lunchtime or at work. It's for something great and not have to go to the cinema in a month's time to catch it. But I wanted to sort of look at that and also, just get it down as a document of being a fan before the internet and where you were at the mercy of TV broadcasters and VHS rental stores.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a whole look at growing up as a fan, and all our little geeky ways and our whims. Because when I wrote it, I was surprised by how many people have come to me since saying, "Oh my God, I did that. I thought I was the only one that did that, or I was the only one that neurotically took the tab off the VHS tape and used up all the letters to try and spell out Thunderball." So it's sort of come from that, and it's been a great experience so far.
Mm-hmm. I think what I found most interesting, and how I could definitely relate to this growing up. Bond was everything to me. It definitely was to you. And the more, especially with social media, you get out there in the forums, you find out like how many like diehard Bond fans out there, and same with Batman too. You had your own premieres. You had there's the View to a Kill T-shirt, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 007 watch, the Duran Duran, A View to a Kill soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Let me start with that also. What was funny is growing up, my dad, he had the James Bond VHS, and I think I don't know if you talked about this in the book. They used to have like a trailer on all the James Bond VHSs is the original action hero, James Bond.
That's right. Yeah.
And what was funny is I would like see these movies and I'm like, what are those? It didn't occur to me. He had like Thunderball down there. He had A View to a Kill, and my mom would buy him the movies, and it never occurred to me what it was. So, I mean, all of a sudden we bought him I think we bought him a CD of the Best of Bond, James Bond soundtrack, where it had like all the Bond, music on there actually performed by Shirley Bassey, Duran Duran, whoever on there. And so I ended up listening to it, and Duran Duran was actually the song that got me hooked on Bond in a way.
Oh,
I was like, it's just such an upbeat song, and it's timeless. It ages so well.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, that was my first Bond, as the book explains, was Octopussy, but that was sort of I always liken it to sort of losing your virginity a bit with Bond, well, with all fandom, but the first one is you're just sort of seeing where everything is, but the second time you'll be able to sort of appreciate and enjoy it a little more. And it was A View to a Kill that was my second, the one I anticipated the most. And I agree with you, that song was everywhere, and it is a timeless song. It's all right, it slaps back, it sounds like a 1985 synth-laden 80s tune, but it's it was a really important song and film, I think, for a lot of people my generation. A lot of the diehard Bond fans and the older crew will lay into A View to a Kill and all its all of its apparent faults. I've yet to see any myself, maybe. That song was just a great, and it rode the charts in a way that Bond songs hadn't at the time as well, for us kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what I liked is it was just upbeat, and I grew up on classic rock and roll, and that song, even if it wasn't a Bond song, I still loved it. So as I went on more through the CD, I'm like, wow, there's some songs on here, and then I ended up, it was 1995, my first Bond experience, where for some reason I turned on GoldenEye at my grandparents', and I remember where I was sitting on my grandfather's recliner, I turned on this movie, I'm like, well, I know Dad's a fan, and I like action, so I'll give it a chance. And I just came out and I was like blown away. And then, of course, the GoldenEye Nintendo 64 game came out. All my friends are playing that all the time. And then, of course, Tomorrow Never Dies is right around the corner. I'm like, okay, I bought the Tomorrow Never Dies soundtrack, listened to the whole David Arnold score over and over again, probably burnt the CD out because that is probably one of my favorite Bond scores, I think.
And I agree with you on that. Yeah.
If it wasn't the Moby James Bond theme on there, it was... there's one on there called Company Car, which I thought was the actual James Bond theme, but then I went back and realized, how long this had been going on. So, and then I went through my dad's VHS movies, and then I became a bigger Bond fan than he did. Now I'm the one giving him the scoop. He's like, oh, so what's going on with Bond? Are they making another movie? I was like, oh, of course, Dad. They have this going on. So it's really funny how the tables have turned with that.
Yeah. It's a real Bond fandom. I'm sure other genres and franchises have it, but it is quite the rituals and the routines of family are really important, and particularly in Britain. But they don't get uncool as well. Like maybe, I don't know. I'm just going to sound like a Brit here, but going to the baseball game with your dad versus then going off with your mates and girlfriends and the guys, that all changes and evolves. But the Bond film, it's not uncool to say I'm going to see a Bond film with my parents tonight, or the new Bond film. Well, I don't think it is anyway.
No, not at all. No, I remember my friends, and well, even though the movie's probably regarded as probably one of the disappointing James Bond movies, if you will, The Die Another Day. I remember when that came out, it was 40th anniversary of James Bond. I'm in college. I asked my mom that day, that's when you couldn't order tickets on the internet just yet. I was like, Mom, can you go over to the movie theater? It's like 30 plus minutes away from the house, and I'm in college, and pick up 4 tickets for my friends and I so we can get to that premiere. and came out of it, and I was like, this was the greatest hits of Bond. It hit me. I was like, I had so much fun with it. Now going back and looking at it, it's like, okay, well, I can see where the gripes are. The first half was really good. Second half on all this too much CGI, I guess, and just kind of felt like a greatest hits of Bond. So
yeah, well, everyone has their entry point. I'm always one of the people that will defend. Yeah, I will defend Die Another Day. There's one or two other Bond films I'll defend less, but I have no problem with Die Another Day because it probably brought in a whole load of Bond fans who loved the car, who loved the Iceland scenes, who think, or even who think the CGI ice surfing moment is okay, and it lets them in. And then, like you say, it's you learn what are the finer wines in the Bond cellar.
Exactly.
And sometimes a Bond film can be like a cheap hot bottle of beer, or sometimes can be like a fine wine. But at the end of the day, it's still booze. It's still fun. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, going back, like looking at the other James Bonds, if you go all the way back to Dr. No the first time I watched that, I'm like, this is, you have to kind of go back in with the mindset. This was 1962. Nothing like that had really been done, not to my knowledge anyway. Yeah. And just how it set the tone and the course for not just James Bond movies, but for other movies to come. It had that template. And then by the time you get to Goldfinger, it's like, okay, this is how James Bond movies are going to be. It's going to be, evil villain. He doesn't have to be like about world domination, but the car, the Aston Martin, you got to have that. You have to have a tux. You have to have the Bond girls in there. There are these exotic beauties. And, then you have the henchman that can do something kind of, odd, whether it's the hat or he has the teeth, like Jaws. And, what I wanted to ask you is what do you think about like James Bond's influence on other movies? And we'll get to the Batman. You can say Batman if you want.
Yeah, of course.
Just even like say, you mentioned in your book, Jason Bourne, there's Mission Impossible out there, or just other movies in general.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, you can look at Bond influencing any era of cinema, and also Bond takes its own influences. I don't think, apart from perhaps Dan Bradley and a few stunt people who've worked on both Bourne and Bond, as an example, I don't think Bond was trying to ape Jason Bourne, because actually what Jason Bourne is doing was aping the 60s Bond films of very kinetic, fast, brutal cuts that Peter Hunt, the first Bond editor, sort of pioneered and seeded that DNA of the Bond pace. Yes, of course, I think maybe not narratively, maybe not in terms of story, because if anything, any film has a villain with a big lair, it's immediately likened to Bond. But I think a lot of franchises echo how the Bond franchise is conducted, how it behaves, like the marketing and the point of making it an occasion, making it an event. I think, I'm not saying Force Awakens particularly copied or emulated any of the broccoli movie announcement machine, but there was a real different turn of events with Force Awakens, where there was a press conference and some photos, but there was actually a dignity to it, which reminded me of how the Broccolis release their films. We don't have to have constant updates and teasers and clips. Yes, of course, Batman. I mean, when I first saw one of the early trailers for Batman v Superman, it instantly was a little bit Bond with Cavill and the Aston Martin. And I love a Bond villain's launch party that goes wrong. And I love that. It's very Mission Impossible. It's very Batman. It's very, dare I say, it's very sort of Dynasty in Dallas, all that sort of glamour, and in an era where money and finance is a sort of dirty word. It's fun to still see those big lavish parties that Bond and Bruce Wayne have. Yeah. But yeah, there was a couple of things. Not only was the Aston Martin, and I was curious to see that both Bond and Superman have saved the Day of the Dead festival in Mexico in the last few months of cinema. And I was trying to struggle to think, was there any other sort of Spectre echoes in Batman v Superman, but I haven't seen them yet.
I'm trying to think. I only saw the movie one time. What did you think of the movie?
Which one, Batman?
Yeah, Batman v Superman. Did you have a chance to see it? I
did, yeah. I saw it opening day. I am one of the three people in the world who doesn't hate it with a passion.
Okay.
It's got its faults.
Yes.
it's got a lot of faults. I still think a lot of its faults didn't put me at distance from the film in the way that those faults in other franchises will just leave me well away. Like the whole Transformers thing, the whole falling masonry and the action. I was watching Batman v Superman. I was never once lost in the progression of all the action and the physicality of it. As soon as they announced it, I thought they've got a hard job with that. What may work in a comic book form with all its offshoots and, that whole industry of comic bookness. I thought to do that on film, particularly with Superman, is going to be hard. I remember seeing those documentaries where Tom Mankiewicz, who wrote Superman the movie and parts of Superman 2, he got a grip on it, unlike any other writer, where you will just have this comic book camp if you're not careful, where you're just trying to just physically represent the comic books rather than actually present them as films. And I think the problem Batman v Superman has is that it's two films, it's two tones. Batman and Superman might be mates. They might geographically be in the next city, but they're tonally very, very different movie characters. I don't know so well if they obviously chime and work together brilliantly on, in terms of ink on the printed page. But I had a problem. It starts as a Batman movie with yet another the Wayne family leaving the movies and it all going wrong down an alleyway. And I love all that, but I'm like, really? We're going to have a Dutch tilt on the camera? We're going to do that for the umpteenth time? We're going to be doing that? And then the film ends as a Superman film. And again, quite brilliantly with bagpipes and it's Wrath of Khan and it's all got that Washington sort of Martin Luther King assassination dignity to it. I love it. Yeah. But in the middle, it just doesn't quite. It's quite a sadistic film. It's quite I don't feel that Martha Kent should be kidnapped, and it just feels all a bit ISIS. I just felt it was all a bit grubby. I also don't think that Superman and Batman would be enemies. Yes, that we want to see them have that tussle, but I actually wanted just to see Bruce and Clark hang out at a baseball match that goes wrong, where they both work together but don't. It's almost farcical where they're not trying to reveal their real identities and having that scar comparing moment. Who's got the greater scar, or what's the best way of catching a goon down an alleyway? I wanted to see more of them getting on. So yeah, but I still liked it. I still think Henry Cavill is a great Superman. I am very intrigued to see if he ever does Bond. I don't mind Ben Affleck as Batman. The costume was a bit weird. He looked a bit overweight and flabby, but I don't mind that because Ben Affleck's a great movie hero.
Yes, very much. Yeah, Henry, what you said about Henry Cavill being Bond, or hopefully we get into being James Bond. I mean, I think it was right before Daniel Craig, right before they announced that they were trying to get Henry Cavill, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was the very close second choice.
Yeah.
When eventually it went to Daniel Craig. I think Barbara Broccoli wanted, I could be wrong on this, Barbara Broccoli, the producer, wanted Craig, and Martin Campbell was opting for Cavill, but it went towards Craig in the end.
Yeah. It's never too late.
No.
Yeah, and if you had a chance to see The Man from U.N.C.L.E., you can definitely see how, I mean, while he was playing an American CIA agent, he had everything that was so James Bond in there. Just how he, looked with the gun with the silencer on it, how he was, sleeping with just the random girl, and it's just like, okay, you had me sold, just make this happen. If Daniel Craig's not going to come back, then Henry Cavill, please, sign on to be the next James Bond. And
absolutely. Yeah, I agree on that. I'm not a big fan of Man from U.N.C.L.E. film. I found story-wise it was a bit threadbare, but the look of it and the panache, sometimes I don't mind a film being rubbish as long as it's got panache and a bit of swagger about it. And again, that's that whole Bond thing of, we don't get characters entering a room like Bond does, but they did that in Man from U.N.C.L.E. They did that in Batman with Ben Affleck.
Yeah, it had a good throwback in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Just of that 60s. I was like, you know what? I was transformed back to the 60s of the era of James Bond. I'm just like waiting for James Bond to pop out. I'm like, it's not James Bond. It never would be. What I wanted to ask you is that you were talking about, like, with Batman and so forth, about too many stories going on at one time. When I watched Batman v Superman, I gave it like about a 3.5 out of 5. It was good. I liked it, but I didn't love it at the same time. My problem with it was there were so many different stories in there. You had a Batman story, like you mentioned. You have a Superman story. You have Lex Luthor and whatever else you're setting up for the Justice League. And I could go on, and I have before. But I guess I read this article off last week. It's about reboots, requels. That's I think it's a word they created. It's called a requel, which is like, I
saw that word today. Actually, I was wondering what it meant. Now you said it in context. That's exactly what it means.
It's and they did this with Star Wars, which I just watched last night. And Daniel Craig, I almost said Danny Boy. He made a nice little cameo in there, which he's so playing a stormtrooper James Bond in there, which is probably my favorite part.
I think the character who's something like JB007, but they couldn't acknowledge that'd be too much. That was the script name for him, apparently.
Nice. In other words, what the requel is it's a reboot of a movie, I guess of a character, like, say, Batman or James Bond, and then they're doing a sequel at the same time. So that could be done with, say, movies like Batman v Superman, movies like Star Wars The Force Awakens. And in James Bond, we've had a reboot before, which was Daniel Craig, becoming a new James Bond in a way. And now they have, this is the James Bond you're going to be given. We're going to see him as he's starting off, just getting his 00 status. And then, how he gets his license to kill. And, here's Vesper and so forth. So what are your thoughts on just movies in general, whether it be James Bond or Batman with that?
When it comes to Bond, I say this in the book, and I always say it, that every Bond film is a reboot. When From Russia with Love came out in 1963, you could see them sort of going with the formula that they've already created, but advancing it. By Thunderball, the fourth Bond film, you've got one of the characters sort of talking ironically about Bond and all the women that he's killed, and they're already sort of requeling, if that's the word we're going with. They're already doing that. So I think every Bond film is a reboot. The producers, Michael Wilson and Barbara Broccoli, liken it to trying to go for second election of the presidency when you've only just got in on the first time. And I can utterly see that. I can see what you mean. It's an interesting point you've attached there to Batman v Superman, that it's a sort of prequel movie and reboot all at the same time. One of the things I didn't mind about it so much was, apart from Wonder Woman and all those emails, and I thought the Flash moment was really cool.
It was.
I recognised Ezra Miller, and I loved that, because that was when I clicked what was going on. I still have as an English guy that's perhaps not steeped in that American comic book world like you guys are, I still don't give a damn about Aquaman. It's not one of the big things I want to see. Who's playing him? And there Aquaman. It's like, whatever. I didn't mind all those introductions. A few people have said, it's just clumsy and it's awkward. My problem I've got, and I don't think Batman v Superman is as guilty of it as the Marvel films are now, where we've got a film. It's a bit like the Potter films, but the story, it's like everything's being kept at bay for the next movie or in 2 movies' time. And then ultimately what you're watching is a trailer for the third part, or the third part 2. And I just want, this is what I was saying about comic book movies, I just want them to be a movie. I personally don't understand why every comic book movie has to be an origin setup. I just want to see Batman and Superman being Batman and Superman. So I'm tiring of these Marvel films just forever keeping everything at bay, and every post-credits sequence is a little sort of Easter egg nugget of something else. Just make the film you're doing, that good. That's what I always think.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing too. If you go back to even say Skyfall, you have Sam Mendes coming on here and he's doing a James Bond film, but at the same time, he's kind of making it a standalone James Bond film. Same with Dark Knight. They're just making the movie. They're focusing on characters. And this is just my perspective. I guess now I've gotten older, I'm being even pickier with my movies. I still love a good popcorn movie, just suspend disbelief. And sometimes you have to, it's all entertaining. When you have a movie, it's all about the characters. Give me a good story. And, I like the good action sequences, of course, but don't just worry about what's going to happen for the next film. Worry about what's happening at that time. Give me that story. And if it happens to be where it's received well by critics and by audiences, then you greenlight the sequel. Right now, it's just like, okay, we're just thinking 5 steps ahead, and we're just kind of just like you said, it's a setup film, just plain and simple.
Whatever's wrong with Superman 4, the fact it doesn't set up 5, 6, and 7 is not its fault. Mm-hmm. That's always how I liken that.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of the Daniel Craig Bond movies, I did want to ask you, what did you think of Spectre?
I really liked it.
Okay.
I think it's probably his best performance as Bond because he's so just enjoying it.
Yeah.
I got some story gripes with Blofeld Oberhauser stuff. I likened it a bit to Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where that film should have been a B movie about aliens and UFOs, and it's trying to hide what it's got. It's trying to hide its treats. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why Spectre had this story urge to just keep hiding and keeping Blofeld at bay. Because I think perhaps if he'd been Blofeld from the start, we could have had more fun with it. Yeah. Saying that, we've possibly got more Blofeld appearances in times to come, and who knows, maybe Christoph Waltz will come back. As a production, I think it's stunning. It wasn't actually till I watched it at home on Blu-ray how beautifully directed it is. Just the choice of shots and it breathes. There's nearly half an hour where there's not much action. It's Q and M and a lot of corridors and people talking. I love all that. And the Mexico City sequence is just stunning.
The one shot that they did.
Yes,
and it's one shot pretty much the whole way.
Yeah. It's alluded to be one take.
Right.
It's not at all. Of course it's not. No. But the point that's what they were going for. That's why it works. And it's just that whole Mexico sequence is just so over the top and so big, but also very Bond. And I always think a Bond pre-title sequence, you should be exhausted and think you've seen the whole film as those titles kick in. And you're like, I love the Sam Smith song. I had no problems with it. I haven't liked some of the comments of some fans about him and the choice of where that song went, but I love it. So all in all, I think it's a great, cracking Bond film. I'm always going to be biased. I could perhaps do with less London in the next Bond film, but I'm sure, we're going to have a very different Bond film next time round. I
think so too. Just overall with Spectre, like you said, that opening sequence with the chopper, I remember watching I think I went on YouTube or the making of Spectre, and just that guy, he's a Red Bull helicopter pilot, and just what he's doing with that helicopter, I'm like, that's a Bond movie, because they're always thinking a step ahead. What can we wow the audiences with that hasn't been done before? They always stay a step ahead.
Yeah, and keeping within the story a little bit. Just keep it sort of semi-sane. Yeah, he did all those roles for real. I think some of the crowds beneath were sort of composites, but that stunt was done for real. And when we first saw it at the Odeon Leicester Square in London, people were just literally leaning forward in their seats, just sort of like, I think it's a great Bond film where gravity is very important, if that makes any sense at all. So you've got the gravity there's a lot of helicopters in it, with the helicopter at the end, Bond just falling down on a sofa in the Mexico rubble. That's a great moment. There's a lot of sort of gravity moments in that film.
There was a lot of throwbacks in that movie too, and in a way, and people said this online too, and I could kind of see their point. It's like that could almost have been a 50th anniversary James Bond in itself, just because of the sorry, timer went off. Because of just like the throwbacks, like you said, the couch that would easily be from You Only Live Twice. The helicopter going down, that's GoldenEye. This, whatever. The scenes that really stood out for me were easily Rome. Everything that was filmed there was it's gorgeous. I could watch that on loop over and over again. The car chase, it was a different kind of car chase, but how they ended it off, not all the gadgets working in there. That's I still love that. With the whole Blofeld thing, we knew it was coming, and my problem with that is that instead of just trying to hide it, they could have just said, okay, he's Blofeld, this is your Blofeld, and just go with it, instead of, like you said, the mystery to it.
Yeah, I think what did happen, I do sort of know this, that after Skyfall, and it was a mega hit, critically, commercially, in terms of the awards as well. And I think Sony and some of the big wigs further up the chain wanted Skyfall 2, and Skyfall 2 back to the chapel. So I don't know. This is just my inference, but I think possibly the script sessions, they were trying to work out how can we get Bond's past? How can something be a real personal blow to him? Mm-hmm. And then we have that reveal that it's his quasi sort of half stepbrother.
Right.
I think Bond doesn't care that it's Blofeld.
No.
So I don't know why we had to have all that sort of secrecy but the whole Blofeld arc in terms of Bond now is maybe only just starting. We could have a lot more to come.
If Daniel Craig does come back, which I hope he does one more, I don't know. I mean, there's always rumors about Tom Hiddleston, Tom Hardy, whoever, possibly stepping into the role. If they do the one more, I know which direction I would like to see it. I think, have Blofeld, break out of prison, something like that. And he ends up, how it ended off, spoiler alert here. Daniel Craig drove off into the sunset in the Aston Martin with, Madeline Swan. If Blofeld would kind of get his revenge and kill Swan kind of like on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then Bond comes out of retirement and has to go after Blofeld. In my mind, that's what I would like it to be, but I mean, I'm sure that there's better ideas out there. What would you like to see?
First of all, I really dearly hope Daniel Craig does come back for a fifth film. Who knows at the moment, but we live in a crazy era of movie making where Harrison Ford's playing Indiana Jones age 76 and Princess Leia is going to have more scenes with Harrison Ford. So who knows? I would love him to do another one. I think, I agree with the whole thing of Blofeld's obviously got to break out and become more a menace again. I doubt it would be with Madeline Swan because Bond always drives off with finality at the end of every Bond film, or rows away or flies away. And it always feels like that's the last Bond film ever. And then we reset and start again. And I love that. A lot of people said, the end of Spectre feels like Daniel Craig signing off. Well,
it did, yeah.
But you could possibly say that about, Pierce Brosnan in Tomorrow Never Dies, or World's Not Enough.
GoldenEye. Yeah, he flew away with Natalia.
GoldenEye, yeah. Yes, I'd like to see Blofeld come back. I heard and I'm normally not one for fan sort of tittle tattle and gossip.
Yeah.
Harry, I just dropped you there.
I'm here.
Right. Yeah, I'm not normally one for fan rumouring, but I was out for lunch with a Bond fan pal the other day, and he had heard of this ridiculous notion where at the moment Bond is in Blofeld's sort of torture lab. For the rest of the film, that is just Bond hallucinating.
I have heard that. Yeah.
And I thought, that's ridiculous. But how amazing would that be if that was the reveal at the beginning of the next Bond film?
Yeah.
It's a bit Bobby Ewing in the shower, but who cares? This is Bond. And I really thought that was a clever, funny idea, because a lot of people think that everything's perfect. It's all, he fires a gun at a helicopter going down the Thames and he gets it. It's almost like a dreamscape perfection.
Right.
I'm sure they won't do that. They'll start again. Blofeld probably is no longer in prison. They'll twist it and have some fun with it, where he got immunity and is now working in Panama on a lot of papers. Who knows?
If they do it and I haven't read the book, I've only heard part of it about You Only Live Twice, where Blofeld, had killed his wife and then got away and is under a different identity. That might be a good direction for them to go, because how they did it with You Only Live Twice in the movie is far different from the book, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I want to see the Garden of Death in a Bond film.
Yes.
I just think visually that is just brilliant. But that's what I'd love to see. It's interesting times. I'd also like to, because I've seen Christoph Waltz be Christoph Waltz better than that. Yeah. And I almost would love to see them recast. I'm sure it won't happen, and I think Waltz has been committed to a film or two more. But that in that sort of 60s way of just keep recasting Blofeld, let's just do it. Let's just be crazy with it. But that's just me trying to sort of scare the fans, I think.
Yeah, they could always do the whole plastic surgery thing, or they don't even have to explain it. They didn't in the 60s, and why should they have to now? It just kind of happens.
Yeah,
they could make some kind of inside joke, oh, and I'm not the other guy, that kind of deal. Kind of like how they did in OHMSS. A couple last questions I have for you. I got to ask, how much Bond, you mentioned about Bond memorabilia in your book. How much are you permitted to have, like, around your home? Like posters and so forth. I know how much I'm permitted, but
yeah, it's a constant negotiation with my other half. In fact, he wants Force Awakens poster, so I have to
that's cool. I like that.
On a vintage Man with the Golden Gun poster at the moment, but that's cool. I don't know. We haven't got our apartment's quite small. It's cozy small. So I also don't want loads of. Because, when I'm working, it just feels like I'm at work, surrounded by loads of film memorabilia. But to answer you, not that much.
Okay.
But a lot of it's sort of in the loft, and the dream is to one day have a different place and have the Bond room. I'm sure a lot of Bond fans plan on the Bond room or the Bond shed.
Yes.
One day.
I'm the same way. I know when I lived alone before I met my wife, I had the 50th anniversary Bond poster. It had the Golden Girl on there with all like the titles of the James Bond on there. I had a movie poster that had every single Bond movie poster up to Quantum of Solace. I had the Aston Martin die-cast cars and so forth, and I have James Bond posters, but I have not one of those posters or cars out. I'm looking right now in the back of my room, and I think I have some Bond books that are they have dust on them and a Bond magazine cover. But that's about it. That's all I'm permitted. So she wins this round. But, I will eventually when we get a bigger house, of course.
Yeah. I think it should be like Bugsy Malone when our other halves return home, we just flip all the pictures round and everything just sort of spins around. Like Fat Sam's Grand Slam, where it's all just two homes.
That's a great idea. All right. I got to ask this one last question here. And if Batman and James Bond were in a fight, who do you think would win? It could be any Batman portrayed by any actor, any James Bond portrayed by any actor. Overall, though, who do you think would win?
It's the Stand By Me campfire question, isn't it?
Yeah. Because this has been explored a lot online, and there's not been one good answer. Remember, James Bond has his gadgets, Batman has his gadgets, but, it can be either or, too.
I'm going to say Bond, just because that's my allegiance to the...
All right.
The Bond flag. I think Bond would cope better if everything he had was taken away from him. But Batman or Bruce Wayne might struggle a bit if he doesn't have the sort of piton bat wrist flicking thing and all of that. So I'm going to say Bond because he's possibly more resourceful when the chips are down.
That's true. He doesn't always need the gadgets to get him out of there. He is very intelligent. Yeah, we've seen that, when he's stripped away from his gadgets, even Casino Royale, he can still, if he's as strong as, say, Daniel Craig nowadays, then he might win.
But then you've got sort of, I'd love to see a Roger Moore v Adam West.
Ooh.
Slam down. But then if you had perhaps Christian Bale v George Lazenby, I wouldn't fancy George Lazenby's chances.
Yeah, George Lazenby in that movie, in his only Bond movie, there was a lot of fighting with that. And I always picture, anytime I look at the very beginning of that opening sequence, how he throws a punch. He does just like this very long punch with his arm extended, just like a wide punch. And he just really, I get a kick out of it every time. But his fight sequences in there were great. I mean, or at least how they were filmed.
Because they're not too choreographed as well, because you can tell he's flailing around. I think the story was he did knock out one of the massive stuntmen at the time because he didn't quite know there's fighting and there's screen fighting. I think perhaps George Lazenby may have gone for the more fighting.
Yes, he was a very physical Bond, if you will.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, Mark, the name of your book is Catching Bullets, Memoirs of a Bond Fan. The book is available on Amazon. I did like your, recently you did the one when Batman v Superman came out, the references between, or the, I guess not crossover, but what Batman and James Bond had in common. And I think a new one we could come up with, at least in Batman and Star Wars, would be that Blofeld and what's his name? He was at the very beginning of Star Wars: The Force Awakens. He played Blofeld in Never Say Never Again. What's his name?
Max von Sydow.
Yes, he was in there. There's a couple other things. Of course, Daniel Craig being in there as well. But Bond's everywhere. Same with Batman. But I still like I said, reading your book made me realize just, how a Bond fan, what it is to be a Bond fan, I guess. And everything that at least how I am, in my wedding, I came out to the James Bond theme by David Arnold. Our first dance was Nobody Does It Better by Carly Simon, which somehow my wife let me get away with that. I don't know how.
That's good. I didn't get away with the Bond for our first dance.
I did my best. My ringtones are Bond. I listen to the scores all the time, and I can never watch these movies enough. So, everything you put in your book, it just, made me realize, I'm proud to be a Bond fan, and, I love the book.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, and appreciate the chat. And I'm going to say, you must have known this. I think we had a chat about this before, but I think, was it the first on-screen Batman, Lewis Wilson, in the 1943 Warner's serial, where he was the father of Michael Wilson, who's co-producing the Bond films now. So I think that's a great sort of linking of the two worlds, and as good a place as any to carry on with Batman v Bond. So I'm going to ask you a question. What do you see the future of Batman v James Bond? That whole arena of duality of the two franchises, because it's an interesting one.
It is. I know people have always done like the fandom, fan fiction, just like what if Batman were to fight James Bond? James Bond and the Bruce Wayne character, if you look at it, those two have a lot in common. Where their parent, they're kind of. Yeah, they both are orphans. Both of them, lost their parents. One was in a skiing accident. One was just they were gunned down by whether it was the Joker or just somebody mugging them. There's always going to be references between the two, whether that's the gadgets or driving an Aston Martin, getting the girls and so forth. Trying to think here. I still, it's always tied to me between which character I like better also. And I love them both. I mean, I think I've been a Batman fan longer because 1989 Michael Keaton Batman was one of my first Batman film experiences, and I think I was probably too young to watch James Bond, maybe because a PG rating at that time was more like a PG-13, and the elements that they explored in there, I guess assassination, sex, and whatever else. I mean, it was a little different than a Batman movie, I guess. I'm going off course here with your question, and
well, it's interesting because the whole, I think Bond proved that you could recast as well.
Yes, you can.
And I think that gave those franchises. I remember when Val Kilmer came in and then George Clooney, it began, not just because Bruce Wayne is very Bond, you're right, but it felt like, this could go on forever and it has. Yeah. We've got different variants and each Batman brings different things to it based on perhaps the world or the times we live in. And Bond is no different.
Right. There's always going to be another Batman, whether right now the flavor of the week is Ben Affleck, and it seems like he had a great response and reception from fans and critics, so I think he's going to be around for quite a while. Well, he's in his early 40s, but as long as he can be around anyway. Yeah. With James Bond, if Daniel Craig doesn't come back, we've seen now that they can recast another Bond or another actor to play Bond, and I know that it's in good hands. I feel very comfortable with the decisions that they made. Whether I'm always going to like the newest movie compared to the old stuff, that's to be determined. I mean, but we always have those old Bond flicks to go back to. Some age better, like you said, than others. Like I said, Henry Cavill's obviously my top choice. Now, whether they decide to go the story of James Bond, do they want to go back to more the jokey kind of, it's the end of the world, we have nuclear weapons, that have been hijacked or whatever else? It wouldn't surprise me if they eventually get back to that, but it all depends because they always take out of what's going on in the world today, whether it's terrorism or anything else in that matter, with oil, water supply, anything like that.
Yeah. They always surprise as well. I think if and when we get another Bond actor, it'll be someone that's possibly not on any of these lists at the moment and will be the obvious, yes, why didn't any of us think of him? I trust Barbara Broccoli. She's got a very canny eye for casting. She's very fond of theatre and sort of independent movie scene. And I think, whoever it might be next will possibly go, okay, because Craig wasn't.
Yeah, he wasn't
universally accepted at the beginning.
Yeah, the fans kind of outraged when that happened. They were just like, he doesn't look like James Bond. Well, my argument is always this. If you look at the cover of a James Bond Ian Fleming book, do you really see a picture of James Bond on there? He's usually in black and white, or his face is all blacked out, and he's in a tux. James Bond can be anyone, just as Batman can be anybody with all, within reason. So any actor, whatever ethnic race they decide to go with, I mean, no one's ever going to be happy, but I do trust the producers that it's not just now about if somebody looks like James Bond, it's more as can they portray the part and put their own spin on it.
Yes, that's why I could be proved very wrong. I don't think Tom Hiddleston, because his name keeps coming up, because he's a bit suave and playing a spy in a John le Carre series. It's a bit like the Clive Owen syndrome.
Oh, I wanted Clive Owen. I was on that bandwagon. I remember that. Yep.
He wouldn't have been a bad choice, but just because an actor wears a tux in a film doesn't mean he's going to be Bond. Yeah. Otherwise, we would have a lot of random actors playing Bond. Mm-hmm. And it's the Hiddleston thing. I'm quite anti at the moment. I could be persuaded otherwise, but I don't feel he wouldn't win in a fight. Mm-mm. I could be proved wrong. We shall see. Yeah. But at the moment, I'm fingers crossed for Craig.
Yeah, me too. I think that sometimes it's better to go with a no-namer.
Yes.
And then they can set their own reputation. And if that's the direction that they go in, hats off to them. So, yep. Well, once again, the name of your book is Catching Bullets, Memoirs of a Bond Fan. Like I said, available on Amazon. Where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Mark Zero Connell. It's Mark O'Connell, but the O is a zero. My website is markoconnell.co.uk. Catching Bullets is on Facebook, quite easy to find there, and that's probably the best place at the moment to sort of see what we're about. And there's lots of sort of photos and reports. And I try and do different approaches to Bond news and just have different angles. So yeah, that's the three places you can find me.
Mark O'Connell, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah. I hope to talk to you soon.
Not at all. Thanks for asking. It's been good fun. I'm sure we'll catch up again.
Lots of fun, definitely. Well, until next time, thank you. And
all right. Thank you. Cheers.
All right. All right. That was, I know that we just wrapped things up and so forth, but I just need to say it again. This was such a great interview. It's, as a fan of, especially, James Bond, but just, we're all fans, and that's kind of why this podcast does exist, is because, of the movies, Batman fans, James Bond fans. I think we can all relate and say that, there are different types of fans out there and so forth, but if just having something that you really enjoy, you like about, these characters, it's just fun how everything comes together. What brings us all together, whether it's, however many, however many times we've watched the Batman franchise movies, how many times we've watched the James Bond movies, which one is your favorite, which character, likes differences, whatever, if you own t-shirts, watches, magazine, video games, whatever kind of thing. It's just, it's such a great thing to be a fan of these, and because they're always going to be evolving, James Bond's always going to return, Batman's always going to be there because the fan base is there, and just because these characters are unlike other, they are superheroes in a way that, they don't have superpowers, but any character, any actor can portray them and put a new spin on them, like Mark and I talked about. So it's just nice to know that there are, other people, I guess growing up, it was just, I'm like, am I like the outcast? Am I the only one who feels this, that James Bond or Batman does affect my lifestyle and so forth, whatever. It's like, I kind of I listen to the music, but, while other kids are listening to whatever kind of, new age rock is out there, rap music, hip hop or whatever, I'm like going back and listening to the James Bond scores over and over again. And I had nobody to share that with. And I think what's nice now is that with the invention of the internet, social media, and forums and whatever else, it's a nice little place for us to hang out, and of course this show too. So that about wraps it up for this episode of the Batman vs. James Bond show. Once again, please subscribe on iTunes and or Spreaker. Make sure you rate this show and leave a comment. Let me know how I'm doing. Follow me on Twitter at Batman vs. Bond, and like me on the Batman vs. James Bond Facebook page. Like James Bond, I will return. Thank you for listening. Once again, a very big shout out, and thank you to Mr. Mark O'Connell, author of Catching Bullets, Memoirs of a Bond Fan. Until next time, peace out and have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.